residents are taking the council to court, and Bill is assisting us. And we have a court case being seen in the High Courts of Justice on the 30th, isn't it? I'm going to pass it across, and he's going to tell you a little bit of information about the case, yeah? Oh, you've got one. Oh,
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Shiva. Bill Parry-Davies. I'm a solicitor. I'm acting for the Hackney campaign. I'm actually honoured to be representing this campaign because it is a campaign against social injustice. It's a campaign against environmental injustice. This is a campaign that has raised a petition of over 16,000 signatures, requiring Hackney to withdraw these road closures and have a proper public consultation. It has a Facebook campaign of over 7,200 members, and it has raised a substantial amount of money to fight this case. These cases are very, very difficult. Only 25% of these types of cases win, judicial review cases win. And people say to me, Bill, why are you taking on these cases? There's no money in it. You're going to lose. But it is a battle for environmental justice and social justice. I first got interested in this issue about 15 years ago. I was asked by a community in Wapping to investigate and represent them in a case concerning a new development called the London Dock. And in the London Dock, the Tower Hamlets Council had voted to allow a huge development where the social housing and the new school was right next to the highway. The highway is one of the busiest roads in that part of London. And at about that time, King's College University was doing a massive survey of children in Tower Hamlets, the children who lived on the social housing estates closest to the highway. And what it found was that those children had greater incidences of asthma, of chronic bronchitis, of poor growth of their lungs, and multiple illnesses that caused them lifetime deprivation. And the Wapping community said to Tower Hamlets Council, why are you allowing this school to be built right on the highway when it was originally planned to be away from the highway closer to the river? And the explanation for that was that the houses closer to the river with the clean air and the river views are for private residents. That was the explanation. And we issued a court action, and I took advice from two different barristers, and the barristers said, look, you cannot win this action because the councillors knew what they were doing. It was deliberate. And that was 15 years ago. And I felt at that time this was a case of social injustice, and I remember that case when Shiva first approached me to see what I thought about this campaign. The second time I got involved was when, about 6 years ago, the London Cycling Group and TfL and Hackney Council decided to make a cycleway across London Fields, through the London Fields community, out onto Middleton Road to the west. They had a consultation, and 70% of the local residents objected to that proposal. And the local residents association, 4 of them instructed me, and I said, what we need to do is get an independent traffic consultant's report. And that traffic consultant found that if Hackney were to implement those 13 road closures in London Fields, it would have a severe impact on local schools. Because as you probably know from your own experience, most of the large local schools in Hackney, where the children go and walk to get to those schools, are on main roads. Most of the major housing estates and social housing and dense housing estates in Hackney are on the main roads.
It's a disgrace!
So eventually Hackney backed down 5 years ago about those 13 road closures in London Fields. But last year, when they decided to implement LTNs, the leader of the cabinet dealing with environmental issues called those 70% of local residents who objected, he called them a minority of bullies. A minority of bullies had stopped that injustice, and the council last year implemented 32 road closures, including the road closures in London Fields, without any consultation and apparently without any regard to the injustice, the social inequality and the environmental inequality that those road closures would cause. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I have a film of the Mayor of Hackney, and he'd just implemented some road closures in Stoke Newington that had increased the level of pollution around a local school. And he said, we've done studies in 2018-19, and we want all of Hackney's neighbourhoods to be low traffic, cycling, walking neighbourhoods. And he'd done studies about it, and that was the plan. That was the plan 18 months before the COVID pandemic, 18 months before they received government guidance which said you must try and improve conditions for walking and cycling for local residents. So it was a plan in long gestation. When I heard that, a year ago, 9 months ago, I made a Freedom of Information Act request. I said to Hackney, please let me have a copy of the studies of motor traffic that you've done. Please let me have the studies of the air quality impact and the congestion impact. That was in September of last year. They ignored my Freedom of Information request. They say they're a council that wants transparency and doesn't object to public scrutiny, but only last week did I get that information from Hackney. So I passed that information to an independent traffic consultant who's now made a report, and you can see that report on the Hackney campaign website. And what that report found was that Hackney's claims to have reduced traffic, that LTNs have reduced traffic on the main roads in Hackney is not accurate. It says, the report from this independent consultant says, Hackney's collection and analysis of traffic evidence is of a low standard. It said that TfL's own data and Hackney residents' videos that you'll find on the website show that although traffic was lower during the period of the pandemic, congestion was higher. The overall volume of traffic was lower, but congestion was higher. And the fourth conclusion of the traffic consultant's report is that the increased congestion on our main roads gives rise to higher pollution because idling vehicles produce greater emissions. And those emissions are affecting the residents and the pedestrians in the dense housing, the local schools, the shops, and at the bus stops on the main road. Hackney are poisoning our pedestrian corridors with this policy. My personal view is that while Hackney claim to be trying to reduce car mileage has in many cases increased. Because instead of being able to take the shortcuts, the cars now have to take the long way round. That long way round means more driving, more emissions, more pain for people who are disabled having to sit in traffic queues. So in my view, LTNs are not a war on cars. They are a war on pedestrians. They are a war on people with disabilities. They are a war on the people who live in the dense housing along these main roads. This housing is cheaper than the leafy, rarefied air of London Fields. And who is it who can only afford the cheaper housing in the most polluted areas on the main roads? You can answer that question yourself. Three months ago, we made our first application to the High Court, and the judge refused the application. And so I was instructed to appeal. And we did appeal. We said we have a good argument on our case. And Lord Justice Bean in the High Court said, yes, you have a reasonable argument on 4 of your grounds.